Hello, everybody. We're back with the Tokyo FinTech podcast, and we're very honored to welcome Makoto Shibata-san today, who is the head of FINOLAB, and we generally refer to him as the Godfather of FinTech here in Japan. So welcome, Shibata-san. Good to see you again.
Hello. Good to see you again, and thank you for having me, and with the nice words about myself. I've been around in this FinTech world for many years, so I think I have some knowledge about what is happening in Tokyo.
Some knowledge and some great relationships across the ecosystem. So maybe that's a good point to start about your career and how this led you to the engagement with FINOLAB now.
So I've been a long time banker. I started my career as a banker back in 1984 and working in the branch office and worked in the corporate finance area and corporate accounting, all these different areas in the financial service. And I ended up in digital banking area. And I worked in the digital banking area for about 20 years. Just from the beginning of the online banking, I worked for this Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi UFJ, and they started online banking in 1999. So I started my digital banking career just before that. And then I've seen ups and downs in the e-business, e-commerce, digital banking area, and worked for more than 20 years in that area. In the end of my career, I was heading the digital innovation team, global innovation team, and try to set up a team to cover different innovation initiatives around the world. I've started from Silicon Valley in US and then expanded that into East Coast, New York, and then we had another team in Singapore, and then we've opened another innovation office in UK, London. So that was my journey to expand the innovation activities. And along the way, I came close to the FinTech startup community in Tokyo. When FINOLAB started in 2016, I started to support them as a mentor. Many of us who are supporting FINOLAB created a mentor group called FINOVATORS, which consists of lawyers, bankers, venture capitalists, technology specialists, ex-regulators, and we've been around for some time to support FINOLAB, and also we've been supporting FinTech Association of Japan. So we've supported the FinTech whole ecosystem from the very beginning. And after a while, FINOLAB has grown quite a bit. They decided to set up their own legal entity in 2019. And at that time, they invited me to be part of the management team of FINOLAB. So here I am now, head of FINOLAB, trying to run the whole operation.
Wonderful. Great careers. You had a global team. You obviously speaking at many conferences internationally as well. So you've got a great perspective at what's going on in the global fintech ecosystem and how that can map into Japan. What is your perspective on where we stand in Japan right now in terms of fintech innovation? And maybe that's different by the various sectors that we're dealing with. But what's your perspective on Japan relative to the rest of the world?
I guess in general, we can say that Japan is not behind the rest of the world. Japan has many talent or technology, but in many cases, the initiatives in Japan tend to be isolated from the rest of the world. So even if a very good technology has been adopted, that might not be expand into the rest of the world. For example, when we started online banking back in 1999, we also adapted a mobile banking iMode platform. So iMode is a platform which NTT Docomo created, and it created compatibility between the mobile world and internet. But iMode was somewhat unique to Japan, and it didn't have appeal to the rest of the world. So when smartphone came out to have direct connectivity with the internet, with the mobile device, iMode lost their charm.
In 2006, I think it was, we had Suica on the mobile phone here in Japan. Suica is the pass card for the subway and the Japan railways. And so you could use your mobile phone with the specific proprietary protocol to pay for your subway and railway fares. And it was 1 year before the iPhone came out even. So it was really innovative, but then iPhone killed all of that, unfortunately.
Right. So they've provided the contactless payment before Apple Pay or Google Pay. They were very innovative in a way, but it didn't expand to the rest of the world. And then something different came into Japan. These kind of things are quite typical, even if the technology is very good. It may not have a good business model to stay in and try to penetrate into the other parts of the world.
Do you see that ultimately changing, or what is the course for that? Is this the entrepreneurs in Japan? Because it is obviously the third largest economy in the world, and getting to a dominant market position here is already quite an achievement. So don't necessarily start with world domination mindset that many people in Silicon Valley might have when you start a business here. Is that one of the reasons? What are other factors that play into that?
Japanese startup people, top management of the startups are becoming aware of the fact that Japanese large players did make some mistakes in the past in terms of using technology to reach the rest of the world. But still, Japan is a sizable market and it requires a lot of effort to establish their business here in Japan. And once they reach to a certain point, going out of the Japanese market requires another effort. It is not only a matter of language, but culture and regulation and other things. So far, we haven't seen many fintech startup players aggressive enough to look at the global market from the very beginning. There are some players reaching outside of Japan, but still we haven't seen huge success. So yes, we are seeing changes in mentality, but no, we haven't come out of a tangible result yet.
What are you doing within the FINOLAB ecosystem? You've got 40 or 50 startups there, plus then the Finovators that you mentioned. What are the programs or the advice that you provide to the startups to make them successful?
So we are an incubation office, and at the same time, it's a membership community consists of 56 startups and 17 corporate members as of end of March 2020. So we support startups to scale, and at the same time, we try to offer opportunity for startups to collaborate with large enterprises or financial institutions. And also, nowadays, large financial institutions are becoming aggressive to work with startups because they are seeing some limitation in the way they can innovate by themselves. Many financial institutions are trying to pursue open innovation, trying to collaborate with different players. We have seen increase in interest from corporate side, not just the smart startup side, to participate in the FINOLAB community. So we try to make things happen in both ways, from startups to financial institution or financial institutions to startups.
So you see the preparedness and the readiness of the corporate players to work with smaller company startups rather than the big scale system integrators. You see that as a positive development over the last few years. It's going in the right direction at the very least.
Of course, big financial institution still works with large IT players, but at the same time, in order to innovate, they are looking at different startup players with different technology or different business model.
Is there also a component where the open innovation approach plus then the capital, the funding together play a role. Obviously, your former employer, you bundle corporate VC activities in MUFG Innovation Partners who sit in the same building on the same floor as FINOLAB, so there's also physical proximity. When you partner with a startup, that you're not only partnering for the technology, but you actually take an economic interest in that startup as well. Is that what would define the Japanese approach to startup innovation and startup relationships?
I guess it's something universal. Many large financial institutions are setting up their own fund or use their own venture capital arm to have investment, not purely for return, but for strategic purposes. And it is true that startups are in need of fund to scale. So they are trying to look for different sources of funding. In some cases, venture capital are suitable for their funding purposes, but also there are different purposes to get fund, not just in terms of capital requirement, but also to have a stronger network connection. And I think many financial institutions are trying to use their network to have better relation with fintech startups. We are finding that for early stage startups, they are always struggling to find the right partner to fund themselves. Here at FINOLAB, now we are seeking to consider the possibility of starting our own fund to fund the early stage players.
That would be interesting. Looking forward to seeing that coming through. Will be funded presumably by your corporate partners.
Right. Now we are trying to find a suitable way to start, and maybe it will take a couple of months to announce, but I think we are in a good track, and maybe start small and then try to see how it works and then try to expand.
Excellent. Exciting news. Let's go through some of the hot topics that we have here in Japan. And cashless is all around us, the drive towards cashless. And here we are in Germany, and Germany is the only country, I think, among industrialized nations that uses even more cash than Japan. And so we love cash, and Japanese love cash, and that's slowly changing. What is your projection there? And do you think that the pandemic that we find ourselves in will contribute to an acceleration in that regard?
Here in Japan, even though people still have affection to cash, we have seen gradual increase in different means of payment. So if we look at the circulation of small coin like 1 yen or 5 yen or 10 yen, it has been decreasing even from almost 10 years ago. Now we have seen big competition between these QR code payment players and some other digital payment players coming into the market after Japanese government announcing that they will try to promote cashless society. They've adopted measures to promote it by giving a subsidy or having some reduction on consumption tax if you pay with digital means. So when we had increase in our consumption tax last year, the government introduced some measures to favor the digital payment means. And especially they are trying to support small, medium enterprises or small, medium shops to introduce acceptance of these digital payment methods. So the whole society is moving towards cashless payment. And also with the pandemic, and people started to think that cash may not be a good means of making payment, even though there's not a very strong scientific evidence that banknote would spread the virus, but people would have a strong image that reducing cash would be a better attitude. Gradually, people would move away from cash payment.
Even on the cashless side, our supermarket, for example, you used to take the credit card, right? Give it to the cashier, and they say thank you. They put it in and so on. And now, because they don't really want to touch your credit card anymore, they installed a terminal for yourself to put the card in. And so there's a low-touch environment that's coming along, which is a totally different habit. I'm still having the habit of handing over my card, and they say, no, stick it in. So, I mean, that has a huge impact on the overall infrastructure, and all the banks have significant investments in real estate and ATMs, and the convenience store chains have tried to offer that as a service that goes beyond a pure ATM, like an all-service terminal. We can get sports tickets as well, concert tickets, etc. The ultimate thing that's missing is an underlying digital identity for this, where we're getting changes with the My Number card, which is the Japanese equivalent of the Social Security number that people in the US would know. The government trying to push that a bit more starting the middle of the year. With the crisis, there's a lump sum payment of 100,000 yen that everybody gets now. And if we all had the digital ID and whatever, some kind of government wallet, it would be really easy to disperse these funds. Because it doesn't exist, we'll all need to go to a website and register ourselves. Would you see My Number develop into some sort of digital anchor ID here in Japan?
There's some potential, but still there are some concern over privacy issues, and also people are not very comfortable of government having full knowledge of your payment or your income. It would take some time for everyone to have this My Number card, and government using that information to make different government interactions. It would take some time, but once people find it, it would be convenient to have this card. It may change. So far, if you have this My Number card, very few things you can do with it, unless you're filing tax by yourself or using it for digital token for very specific purpose to get your government documents. But most things you can do without this My Number card. So it will be necessary to use this card more convenient. You have to create more uses for this card in order for people to obtain this My Number card.
I would love, for example, if my residence information was anchored on that card. Every time I go to a doctor and need to fill out the forms again, I just give them the card and they can pull it down. That would be a time saver. Maybe there are privacy concerns as well. Going on from cashless, open banking is somewhat related, and we do have regulation that comes into effect in May or by the end of May. The implementation seems to be a bit rocky. It was actually one area as well where Japan was very early in putting out regulation, by any means being one of the earliest countries to legislate this. What is the way forward in your perspective?
I guess we learn a lot from UK and other parts of Europe for opening up the bank API. We've legislated the requirement for banks to open up API. Time limit was set at the end of May for banks to open their API, and at least they need to have contractual agreement with fintech startup to provide their data. Because of this COVID-19 crisis, JFSA announced that the time limit has been postponed till end of September. In February, Japanese FSA put out the report that out of 130 banks, only 79 banks have already made a contract. Also, there were like 51 banks trying to negotiate with the fintech startups to start the bank API. We are not quite certain that has been completed at this point of time. Maybe it's not just the virus, but also this situation delay in banks especially the regional banks, move FSA to decide to have this postponed.
You look at the Japanese mega banks, they've all come very similar to what you've seen in the US with JP Morgan through like a number of mergers. So the system landscape is heavily legacy. It compromises on putting different entities together. And I think the Matty is talking about the digital cliff 2025 as well, right? So at some point there needs to be the renovation of these systems to be able to be more agile and play fully in the digital world. But taking new core banking system and plugging it in is not an easy undertaking for banks of this size, of course. And there's different models of saying, well, you can renovate it in place or you create a new digital bank. Then Standard Chartered is talking about this platform banking approach. Where do you see Japan moving? We don't have a digital banking license here yet. Will that come in some shape or form, or will this be more evolutionary?
Even though we don't have a digital banking license, we have had this online banks, internet banks, or mobile banks from before. Japanese regulators did not make having a branch as a requirement to ask for a banking license. So we have seen banks like Japan Net Bank or Sony Banks, and it used to be e-banks, but now it's called Rakuten Bank. And these online banks were relatively early to start with their journey in banking world, and they have relatively lighter, flexible core banking system that will make some difference. So if we look at what the large banks, mega banks have been doing, is that even though they are opening up bank API, they seem to charge relatively high cost for connecting to their API. And that has been creating a problem for startups to get transaction data or balance data from large banks. And if you think about recovering the costs on top of a legacy system, creating an API would create certain costs associated with. And if you just want to recover that cost, you have to charge a lot. But that would not be a way to create ecosystem around API. There would be some difference in the way some banks are trying to create ecosystem without charging, and the traditional large banks trying to charge a lot to have development costs covered with these charges. In a couple of years, we will see some banks creating a good ecosystem while the traditional banks are struggling to expand their ecosystem. And that will have some impact on the way banks would consider about what is the purpose of opening up API.
The market will decide, so there will be some customers who obviously value these services and they will maybe go to the more digital players, and that at the end might tip the market in, and also the legacy players to catch up then in the end. But it will probably take a bit of time if I summarize it correctly.
Also, just like what we have seen in Europe, many challenger banks or the players without banking license may use the different service to offer nearly bank service. And we will see that kind of approach in Japan as well, since API would create flexibility to bring different elements of financial service together. And of course, general public are rather conservative to have a new banking relationship. But if you find some very lucrative offer or very convenient service, you may use it. Even if you stay connected with your existing bank, you will use the convenience service as it is, and we will see more options for financial service in the near future with these APIs and technology developments.
How do you view the ecosystem on the retail side versus, let's say, the SME side? The largest part of the companies in Japan are SMEs. It's the largest employee base as well overall. It's a big part of the economy. And like it's everywhere else, banking for SMEs is pretty hard to get a loan, get the financing and so on. Do you see fintech startups in Japan focusing on that segment of the market as well?
We have seen many startups trying to focus in SME market, either in finance or providing digital transaction means or something like factoring to provide finance for your invoice and things like that. And also we've seen accounting service to digitize your business processes. Current crisis with this virus, even the small, medium enterprises are trying to find a way to improve their business efficiency. That will have certain impact on the way that a startup would support these smaller companies. And that might speed up the process of digital transformation, not just for large corporate, but also for smaller companies. That would be a very big market. So far, we've seen more activities in the retail area for fintech startups, but we will see more activities in the B2B area.
Yeah, I think that would be exciting. Certainly an area where we can help also with the allocation of resources. It becomes harder and harder to hire people, so driving some efficiencies in the business process is probably a good solution. The other topic that's on many people's minds is also the regulation just came out for security tokens. Are you excited about this as much as other people are?
One of the things is how regulation would play a role in the security token. And another is to what extent blockchain can be a practical solution in the financial market. We've done a lot of proof of concepts and trials in the financial area. I think initial impression was that blockchain may be a good technology, but for replacing the existing financial infrastructure may not happen overnight, partly because the replacement cost is fairly big. And also the existing blockchain technology may not offer a perfect solution. They may lack in certain elements to replace the whole financial infrastructure, like bond trading or stock trading or FX trading in terms of volume or security. But we've seen good technology coming out to solve these challenges. It would be a matter of time for us to implement blockchain technology to realize the financial service. And I think security token came into the area in good timing. Major financial institutions are working very hard to either provide the solution or work with other financial institutions in form of consortium or starting the self-regulatory body among the investment banks. And all these things are moving security token forward. Last year, we've seen that legislation came out, and after public comment, just recently, the government announced that a new regulation will start from next month. We may not see the instant application or adaptation of the technology, but players are preparing. So we'll see some use cases coming out.
Came out 2 weeks ago or so, and from the public comments, there were 77 pages of questions and the answers from the FSA. So even our very sophisticated lawyers had to take some time to read through all of this. But yeah, it's still exciting development given where everybody else is globally. So maybe that's also an area where Japan can carve out a leading position.
And even though there are so many things in public comment, I guess the fundamental stance of the FSA is that they're trying to promote innovation, but at the same time, they need to protect investors or general public. And also they wanted to make the regulation clear to different parties in the market. In that sense, if we go through the different articles, they made best effort to make it clear. Maybe it's was a bit disappointing to people who were expecting that some of the regulation would be more relaxed, but that may not be the case. Basically, they try to adopt what was the regulation, the paper world, to be adopted into a digital world.
Securities tokens are securities in the first place, and then a digital representation of that. I think that's a bit the spirit that was expressed in the regulation, right? Okay, we're nearing the end of our podcast. I would be remiss not to ask you for your advice. We obviously have quite a few listeners outside of Japan too, startups that are interested in the market here. What is your advice for fintech startups that are looking at the Japanese market? What should they do to prepare to enter this market once this crisis is over?
Japan has a sizable market. As you mentioned, the size of the Japanese economy is the third largest in the world, and the financial industry has a quite big market. So there's an opportunity. And also, Japanese regulations are quite straightforward, and intellectual property is protected on the global standard. So I think it is worth considering penetrating into the Japanese market once you are successful in any of your home market. People would have some concern that language or culture is the barrier. And it is true that sometimes you might have trouble understanding what Japanese person really meant by having a conversation. But once you find a right partner, or if you hire some good person who can handle Japanese language and maybe English language and start your business, then you will be in the right track. My advice is to come to Japan and talk to different parties and try to find out what would be the opportunity, and then make decision based on the conversation with the different stakeholders in the market. Then once you decide to come to Japan, there are different ways that Japanese government or private enterprise would help you. For example, FINOLAB has been supporting fintech startups to come into Japan. Well-known players like TransferWise or Revolut, they started their Japanese entry by staying in FinLab office, doing a market research, and then hired country manager, and then started to build the team. There are different ways for you to get support. Currently, Tokyo Metropolitan Government is very keen to expand Tokyo as a global financial market, and they started to create this different schemes to support foreign players, either startups or financial institutions, to come to Japan and start their business. So once you come here and knock on the different doors, it may not be difficult to find a way that you can get the support.
There's obviously JETRO as the supporter as well. They provide also some funding and space and so on. From a financial services perspective, just to be also clear, you would still recommend considering Tokyo as a base rather than Osaka, Kyoto, or Fukuoka, which also trying to position themselves as startup hubs for financial services. Tokyo remains the center, right?
Right. In terms of financial industry, almost all major players are around Tokyo, or it's mostly concentrated in Marunouchi, Otemachi, Kayabacho, these areas in walking distance. So it's always better to stay around their area.
Stay around FINOLAB. Super. Thank you very much for taking the time, Shibata-san, during this crisis. I think we all get very used to seeing each other on video, but also looking forward to seeing you in person again once this is over.